Greetings and salutations, dreamers in dreamland. Welcome to the latest edition of Listen to Me. Today is Saturday, February 13th, 2021. And yes, we are on the eve of Valentine's Day. And I wish you all the love in the world on Valentine's Day, but that is not the reason for today's video. The reason for today's video is today is fight day. Yes, that's right, it's fight day, February the 13th, 2021. Now, this is a fight day that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. However, there have been some changes over the past few days, and one of the fight that I was actually most anticipating, has been scrapped and has been postponed due to COVID-19. However you want to look at it. Now, I don't want to speculate too much, but at the 11th hour, Maxim Vlasov, he tested positive for COVID-19, and, that leaves Joe Smith Jr. high and dry. Now, this fight was supposed to be for the vacant WBO Light Heavyweight Championship of the World. That's right, the vacant 175-pound title from the WBO, the World Championship. And Joe Smith Jr., he's been clicking on all cylinders. And, his last two fights on ESPN, he wasn't necessarily the A-side fighter. He was more like the B-side fighter, and in both situations, in fights that, he wasn't really favored to win, and, he wasn't necessarily, by the promoter, he wasn't really the guy that they were wanting to win, so to speak. I mean, he beat Jesse Hart on the road. He beat him from pillar to post. He beat that guy up, and he got out of there with a majority decision. I feel, and a lot of people do feel, it should have been an easy unanimous decision, but regardless, he beat up Jesse Hart. He moved on from that. Then he beat Eleider Alvarez, former world champion at 175 pounds, Eleider Alvarez. And Joe Smith stopped that guy in his tracks, cold, beat him up, and he looked the best he'd ever looked in his career in that fight. He really was working his jab. Joe's always been a hard hitter. Joe Smith Jr. has always been a guy who can really hit hard, really. But his skills, they have not always necessarily been at the top of the world class in the division. But his power has always served him well, and he's been a dangerous fight for anyone. Even in his fight against Dimitri Bivol, where Dimitri Bivol really did, he really did win the majority of the rounds in that fight. I would say at least 9-10 rounds of that fight. But Joe Smith Jr., when he hit Dimitri Bivol clean, Dimitri Bivol didn't like it. Happened a few times in that fight. Go back, take a look at the footage. I can't recall what round offhand, but Joe Smith Jr., whenever he hit Dimitri Bivol, he didn't like it. He really didn't. We all know what happened when Joe Smith Jr. hit Bernard Hopkins, and I'm a huge Bernard Hopkins fan. Always have been, always will be. Respect the guy, one of the greatest of all time. But even though it was a 51-year-old Hopkins, it was still Bernard Hopkins. And Joe Smith Jr. hit that guy and knocked him clear out of the ring. Clear out of the ring. So Joe Smith Jr. has always been a guy who can hit, but his boxing skills have definitely developed. And, he's been clicking on all cylinders, and unfortunately for Joe, his opportunity at a world title has been taken away from him for now. Now, even if they do reschedule the fight down the road, there's going to be some momentum, unfortunately, one way or the other, that's definitely been taken away from the current momentum right now, because currently, Joe's on a 2-fight win streak where he really looked dynamite, where he looked great. And, he was going right on into this fight where, he was clicking on all cylinders. From what I could gather from, his social media and from, what I saw of his camp, he had a great fight camp this time. So, I wish him luck. Joe Smith Jr., good luck. I hope you get your shot at Maxim, and I hope you get him, in the future. Moving on, Richard Comey and Jackson Martinez will now be the main event on tonight's ESPN card in Las Vegas, the top-ranked card. Jackson Martinez is not a bad fighter, but, I think Richard Comey is going to rebound, from his Teofimo Lopez loss, and I think he's going to go out there, and I think he's going to stop Jackson Martinez, quite honestly. I think he's going to stop him in the second half of the fight. I'd say probably the 7th round, but, if you want me to call an exact round, I'd say the 7th, but I say Richard Comey to win by knockout. More interesting fight on that card, in my opinion, being that the Smith and Maxim fight is off. I gotta say, a very interesting fight on the top-ranked undercard tonight in Vegas is going to be Jared Anderson and Kingsley EBay. Now, Kingsley EBay, he was one of my favorite guys to watch in the top-ranked bubble fights. He was fighting every couple of weeks when they first started bringing the fights back on ESPN, and it was every third day pretty much where they were having, a moderate card. We're not going to say it was and not all the cards were incredible world championship caliber cards, but guys like Cassius Clay Collard, he made a name for himself during that time, and another guy that really excelled and really stood out in my opinion was Kingsley eBay. And look, Jared Anderson, he's a great prospect. In my opinion, probably the best American heavyweight prospect right now. Probably. Okay, he's coming up. He's making his bones, but he hasn't really faced much resistance and opposition. I actually think this is a big step up in the competition that Jared Anderson has been facing. In Kingsley eBay. I think Kingsley eBay is definitely a step up in competition. But I also don't think Kingsley eBay has ever faced a guy with the pedigree like Jared Anderson. I think Jared Anderson is, look, it's boxing and there's levels to this. That's a fact. There's levels to this business just like anything else, like any other business, any other sport. And yes, a lot of people would tell you that Jared Anderson is on a different level than a Kingsley eBay. But I'll tell you, boxing is also the theater of the unexpected. So you never know what's going to happen in fights like this. A lot of people thought that Daniel Dubois was going to cut through Joe Joyce like a hot knife through butter. It didn't work out that way. Did it? No, it didn't. So this is an interesting fight. And I'm not telling you that Kingsley eBay is going to beat Jared Anderson. I'm not. But I do think this fight is going to go the distance. I believe it's a 6-round fight, and I believe it's going to go the distance. So let's see what Jared Anderson can do with Kingsley eBay. If you want my pick on the fight, I'll say Jared Anderson by decision. I'll say the fight looks competitive. I'll say that Jared Anderson wins, but I'll say that the fight is closer than a lot of people would expect. Moving on to the United Kingdom, the fight in the United States is going to be aired here on DAZN, and that's with Josh Warrington and Marcusio Lara. Now, when it comes to this fight, I think Josh Warrington is, again, there's levels to this. I think Josh Warrington is definitely a level above Marcusio. No disrespect to Mr. Lara, but I think that Josh Warrington will stop him, and I think Josh will stop him late. I think if he gets him, it'll be in the 8th or 9th round. This is a 10-round fight because the IBF stripped Josh Warrington for whatever reasons. He was attempting to make a fight with, I think it was Khan Zhu, and he wanted it to be a unification, but Khan Zhu is the regular champion. I believe the WBA still has, I think it's Leo Santa Cruz listed as their super champion, even though he hasn't defended the belt in a very long time. So it wasn't going to be a unification, and because of that, the deal fell through, and the IBF stripped Warrington for not fighting his mandatory. I believe that's, how it broke down more or less. But because of that, this is not a 12-round fight. This is a 10-round fight, and it's kind of pedestrian in my opinion because I think Josh Warrington is, again, a class above Marcusio Lara, and I think, Mauricio Lara. I think Josh Warrington is a cut above Mauricio Lara, and I think that, I think Warrington's gonna stop him. I think it's gonna be a late stoppage, but I think he'll stop him 8th or 9th round. But again, pedestrian fights, not for the title. The IBF stripped Warrington. The IBF also stripped JoJo Diaz, but this was more of a stripping of a champion where the champion deserved to be stripped. Did Warrington deserve to be stripped? Maybe, maybe not. The sanctioning bodies, they never really do like to agree to do business with each other very much. And the IBF is the one sanctioning body where they really don't put, unifications above mandatories. They basically, if a guy has a mandatory shot, you have to satisfy your mandatory. That's basically how the IBF breaks it down. But JoJo Diaz, he was stripped not because he wasn't satisfying his mandatory. He was stripped by blowing the weight. JoJo Diaz blew the weight on the scales by more than 3 pounds. And I believe it was Sergio Mora who said that if you blow the weight by more than a pound, you either don't care or you've outgrown the weight class. That's what I believe he said, more or less. Now, I don't know if, I don't think JoJo Diaz outgrew the weight class. I think he got lazy. I think the pandemic didn't really serve him well. I think he got a little bit of a swollen ego after he squeaked out that victory over Tevin Farmer, and he didn't honor the rematch with Tevin Farmer. Now, karma is a bitch, as we know. What goes around comes around. Karma, it'll bite you in the ass. And I think JoJo Diaz got bit in the ass by a little bit of karma here. I think by not honoring his rematch clause with Farmer. And listen, Farmer's a guy who was fighting every 6 or 7 weeks when he was the champion against anyone. And, he put out, Eddie Hearn put out a $7,000 offer. Oh, not 7,000, excuse me, $7 million offer, multiple $1 million offer. I believe it was $7 million to Tank Davis to come over and fight Farmer. And he wouldn't, and Tank Davis said no. And supposedly, and we're going to touch upon this a little bit later, supposedly, Tank Davis said no because Al Heyman, he, as of his own admission, out of his own mouth, Tank Davis said, I wanted to fight Farmer. I wanted to get that other belt. I wanted to unify, I wanted to get that belt. I wanted to bring it back over to this side of the street, but Al Heyman advised me not to. That's what Tank Davis, more or less, that's what he said. Al Heyman advised me not to. Al wouldn't let me. Al wouldn't let me. I believe those are the exact words Tank Davis said. Al wouldn't let me. Now, we all know Tank Davis is a money team fighter. He's a Mayweather Promotions fighter. But the words out of his own mouth were not that Floyd Mayweather. He didn't say Floyd Mayweather would let me fight or take the fight. He said Al Heyman. Al Heyman. So under that large Al Heyman umbrella of fighters, under his control, okay, Tank Davis falls underneath that blanket out of his own admission, and he didn't fight Farmer. But JoJo Diaz did, and JoJo Diaz beat him, but then he blew the weight. So JoJo Diaz, he can win his fight today against, I'm going to give my best interpretation of Mr. Rakimov's name, okay? His first name is kind of tough for me. It's Shavkadan Rakimov. Now, Shavkadan Rakimov, I really hope I'm pronouncing it right. Shavkadan Rakimov, he's the only fighter tonight who can win in Indio, California, on the Golden Boy card, who can win the IBF title. From JoJo Diaz blew that. He came in at 133 pounds, so the only one who can win the 130-pound title tonight is going to be Rakimov. Now, Rakimov, he's a dangerous guy. He's a fighter from I believe Russia. I believe it's Uzbekistan. But he's a Russian fighter, and he's a tough guy. This guy's he's a pressure fighter. He's gonna come out firing on all cylinders, and he's gonna make it a rough and tumble affair. And being that he's the only one that can win the title, and being that JoJo Diaz has apparently, let himself go, not been able to make weight, and, doesn't really seem motivated, in my opinion. In my opinion, if he was really motivated and he really wanted to prove, I don't say he really wanted to prove himself, but he was really motivated and really wanted to, show that I'm the real champion at 130, he would have took the rematch with Farmer and beat him. But he came in at 133 pounds. He blew the weight, stripped by the IBF, and now Rakimov is the only one who can win the title. And I predict that Rakimov will win the title. In Indio, California tonight, we'll have a new IBF 130-pound champion of the world. That is my prediction on that fight. Now, moving on to what I feel is the most interesting fight of the weekend, and it is not the main event of the show in Indio, California tonight, the Golden Boy show, which is on DAZN here in the United States of America. It's actually the most interesting fight. I believe it's the semi-main event, or the lead support. It's or the chief support, however you want to call it. It's Patrick Teixeira versus Brian Castano, okay? Patrick Teixeira is the WBO junior middleweight champion of the world, and he's being challenged by Brian Castano. Now, Brian Castano has a near unblemished record. He has one draw. That's it, and that's to Erislandy Lara, the Cuban fighter who fights on, under the PBC banner. And, it was a questionable draw. A lot of people felt, myself included, that Brian Castano won that fight. I felt he won that fight. And, Patrick Teixeira, he showed his worth in that fight against Carlos Adames, but let's be honest. In this fight, if I have to pick who I think is going to win, I'm going with Brian Castano. Brian Castano is favored to win, even though he is the challenger. And I think he's going to go out there in Indio, California tonight, and he's going to take the WBO Junior Middleweight Championship back with him over to PBC Island. Now, this is very interesting, and this is something else I wanted to touch upon. It's funny. It's very funny how even a PBC fighter like Brian Castano is allowed the opportunity to go over there to the Golden Boy card, to go over there to the other side of the street, fight under a different banner, to go get that belt. But a guy like Tank Davis was not allowed to go over there and get Farmer's belt. Now, why is that? They're both favored to win the fights. Davis and Farmer, if that fight was made, Davis definitely would have been the favorite. Definitely. Unquestionably, he would have been the favorite to win the fight. There was no question about it. Why didn't Al Heyman let him go? But yet with Castano, another guy who's under the PBC umbrella, he's on that island. That's where he gets his, that's where he makes his bread. That's where he gets paid. That's where he fights. But he's allowed to go over there and fight Teixeira on the zone, on a rival platform, on a Golden Boy card. Why is that? Why is that? For whatever reason, there seems to be a pecking order over there at the PBC Island. And if you're an A-team guy, they're not going to let you go anywhere else and do anything else. But if you're one of the expendables, if you're a back burner guy, if you're a Brian Castano, if you're a Sergey Derevyanchenko, okay? Those guys, they can go to other places. If you're an Andy Ruiz Jr. Not if you're a Luis Ortiz, but if you're an Andy Ruiz Jr., you're expendable. You can go over there and fight from under Matchroom. You can go over there and fight on the zone. It's not just one instance. Why is it? Why is it? Charlo can't fight Demetrius Andrade. No, that's not allowed to happen. It's not allowed to happen. $7, $8 million offers. It's not allowed to happen. It's not allowed to happen. And I don't necessarily think it's just Charlo being afraid of Andrade, because I don't think that's really the case. I think that he may personally feel there's bigger fish to fry. He may feel it's going to be, it's going to be a risky fight, riskier than some other fights he can have. But I also don't think Al Heyman is going to I don't think Al Heyman would let Charlo go on any other side of the street. I don't think he would. Look at what's going on with Caleb Plant right now at 168 pounds. Look what he said after his last fight with Caleb Truax. He said, I'd love to fight Canelo Alvarez right here on Fox. I'd love to fight Canelo Alvarez right here on Fox. Well, let me ask you this, Caleb Plant. Does Fox have the kind of money? Does the PBC have the kind of money that Eddie Hearn has? Are you going to get the kind of bag that you would get from Fox, from Matchroom? I mean, right now, Teofimo Lopez is testing the market for himself. His upcoming fight with George Kambosos, everybody thought and everybody thinks it's going to be on ESPN under the top-ranked banner. I don't think so. Uncle Bob Arum offered Teofimo something like $1.5 million, something in that range, or $2.5 million, somewhere around there for the fight. And Teofimo said, nope, I'm going to test the market. And not only Matchroom is put in for bidding, but so is Devin Haney Promotions. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if Devin Haney Promotions outbid Top Rank? And Eddie Hearn just sat on the sideline like this. and let Devin Haney promote Teofimo Lopez. I think that would chap Teofimo Lopez's ass, and his father's ass as well, that the Haneys would be promoting him instead of Top Rank. And I'm not telling you that that's going to happen, but I think it's a possibility that Devin Haney Promotions will outbid Top Rank for that fight. That being said, why won't Al Heyman let his A-team fighters go make some money? Why wasn't Deontay Wilder allowed to take the $100 million to fight Anthony Joshua? What's the problem, Al? Brian Castano can fight Teixeira. Andy Ruiz can fight Anthony Joshua. And Sergey Derevyanchenko, I'm doing the best I can, Sergey Derevyanchenko, he was allowed to fight Triple G. But any of you, your 8-team guys, Charlo, Wilder, keep in mind when Wilder fought Fury the first time, Fury was not signed to Top Rank. That was a cherry pick gone wrong. And then Fury realigned himself before the second fight with Top Rank in America to get American promotion. So why is it that Al Heyman wouldn't let Tank Davis go over there and fight Farmer on the zone and collect the bag and bring the belt back in a one-fight deal? Bring the belt back to PBC Island. He wouldn't let him do it. But he's letting Castano do it. Just a question. I just want to know why. We all want to know why, Al. Why? Till we meet again, dreamers in Dreamland. It's been a pleasure. Yours and not mine. Enjoy fight day. I love each and every one of you. Not nearly equal. Peace.